The World Navel, then, is ubiquitous, and since it is the source of all existence, it yields the world's plenitude of both good and evil, for the hero, as the incarnation of God, is himself the navel of the world, the umbilical point through which the energies of eternity break into time.
And can Westerners grasp this kind of mystical, trans-theological experience? It does transcend theology. It leaves theology behind. I mean, if you're locked to the image of God in a culture where science determines your perceptions of reality, how can you experience this ultimate ground that the shamans talk about?
The best example I know in our literature is that beautiful book by John Neihart called Black Elk Speaks.
Grace, food substance, energy. These pour into the living world, and wherever they fail, life decomposes into death. The torrent pours from an invisible source, the point of entry being the center of the symbolic circle of the universe, the immovable spot of the Buddha legend, around which the world may be said to revolve. Beneath this spot is the earth-supporting head of the cosmic serpent, the dragon symbolical of the waters of the abyss, which are the divine, life-creative energy and substance of the demiurge, the world-generative aspect of immortal being. The tree of life, i.e. the universe itself, grows from this point. It is rooted in the supporting darkness. The golden sunbird perches on its peak. A spring, the inexhaustible well, bubbles at its foot. Or the figure may be that of a cosmic mountain, with the city of the gods like a lotus of light upon its summit, and in its hollow the cities of the demons, illuminated by precious stones. Again, the figure may be that of the cosmic man or woman, for example the Buddha himself, or the dancing Hindu goddess Kali, seated or standing on this spot, or even fixed to the tree. Athos, Jesus, Wotan. For the hero, as the incarnation of God, is himself the navel of the world, the umbilical point through which the energies of eternity break into time. Thus, the world navel is the symbol of the continuous creation, the mystery of the maintenance of the world through that continuous miracle of vivification which wells within all things.
Also spoke of the possible positive aspects of it. It was a vision of what he called the hoop of his nation, realizing that it was one of many hoops, which is something that we haven't all learned well enough yet. And the cooperation of all the hoops of all the nations in grand processions and so forth. But more than that, it was an experience of himself as going through the realms of spiritual imagery that were of his culture and assimilating their import. And it comes to one great statement, which for me is a key statement to the understanding of myth and symbols.
Among the Pawnees of northern Kansas and southern Nebraska, the priest, during the ceremonial of the hako, draws a circle with his toe. Such a priest is reported to have said,
"The circle represents a nest, and it is drawn by the toe because the eagle builds its nest with its claws. Although we are imitating the bird making its nest, there is another meaning to the action. We are thinking of Tirawa, making the world for the people to live in. If you go on a high hill and look around, you will see the sky touching the earth on every side, and within this circular enclosure the people live. So the circles we have made are not only nests, but they also represent the circle Tirawa has made for the dwelling place of all the people. The circles also stand for the kinship group, the clan, and the tribe."
He says, "I saw myself on the central mountain of the world, the highest place. And I had a vision because I was seeing in a sacred manner of the world. And the sacred central mountain was Harney Peak in South Dakota." And then he says, "But the central mountain is everywhere." That is a real mythological realization.
The dome of heaven rests on the quarters of the earth, sometimes supported by four caryatidal kings, dwarfs, giants, elephants, or turtles. Hence the traditional importance of the mathematical problem of the quadrature of the circle. It contains the secret of the transformation of heavenly into earthly forms. The hearth in the home, the altar in the temple, is the hub of the wheel of the earth, the womb of the universal mother whose fire is the fire of life. And the opening at the top of the lodge, or the crown, pinnacle, or lantern of the dome, is the hub or midpoint of the sky, the sun door, through which souls pass back from time to eternity, like the savor of the offerings, burned in the fire of life, and lifted on the axis of ascending smoke from the hub of the earthly to that of the celestial wheel. At the same time, it is the nourisher of mankind. The solar ray igniting the hearth symbolizes the communication of divine energy to the womb of the world, and is again the axis uniting and turning the two wheels.
It distinguishes between the local cult image, Harney Peak, and its connotation, the center of the world. The center of the world is the hub of the universe, axis mundi, the central point, pole star around which all revolves.
Through the sun door, the circulation of energy is continuous. God descends and man ascends through it. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out, and find pasture. He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood dwelleth in me, and I in him. For a culture still nurtured in mythology, the landscape, as well as every phase of human existence, is made alive with symbolical suggestion. The hills and groves have their supernatural protectors, and are associated with popularly known episodes in the local history of the creation of the world. Here and there, furthermore, are special shrines. Wherever a hero has been born, has wrought, or has passed back into the void, the place is marked and sanctified. A temple is erected there to signify and inspire the miracle of perfect centeredness, for this is the place of the breakthrough into abundance. Someone at this point discovered eternity. The site can serve, therefore, as a support for fruitful meditation. Such temples are designed, as a rule, to simulate the four directions of the world horizon, the shrine or altar at the center being symbolical of the inexhaustible point. The one who enters the temple compound and proceeds to the sanctuary is imitating the deed of the original hero. His aim is to rehearse the universal pattern as a means of evoking within himself the recollection of the life-centering, life-renewing form.
The central point of the world is the point where stillness and movement are together. Movement is time, stillness is eternity, realizing the relationship of the temporal moment to the eternal, not moment, but forever, is the sense of life. Realizing how this moment in your life is actually a moment of eternity, and the experience of the eternal aspect of what you're doing in the temporal experience is the mythological experience, and he had it.
Ancient cities are built like temples, having their portals to the four directions, while in the central place stands the major shrine of the divine city founder. The citizens live and work within the confines of this symbol, and in the same spirit, the domains of the national and world religions are centered around the hub of some mother city. Western Christendom around Rome, Islam around Mecca. The concerted bowing 3 times a day of the Mohammedan community throughout the world, all pointing like the spokes of a world-extensive wheel to the centering Kaaba, constructs a vast living symbol of the submission, Islam, of each and all to Allah's will. For it is He, we read in the Quran, that will show you the truth of all that ye do. Or again, a great temple can be established anywhere, because finally, the all is everywhere, and anywhere may become the seat of power. Any blade of grass may assume in myth the figure of the Savior, and conduct the questing wanderer into the sanctum sanctorum of his own heart. The World Navel, then, is ubiquitous, and since it is the source of all existence, it yields the world's plenitude of both good and evil, ugliness and beauty, sin and virtue, pleasure and pain are equally its production.
So is the central mountain of the world Jerusalem, Rome, Benares, Lhasa, Mexico City, you know. Mexico City, Jerusalem, is symbolic of a spiritual principle as the center of the world.
I want to talk about the World Navel because I've touched on this a little bit, and when we did the shrine video last night, I think it's very much related to this. And a bit of the background was because I talk about the hero's journey so much, and that comes from reading Joseph Campbell years ago. So then I went back and got Joseph Campbell's audiobook, The Hero of a Thousand Faces, and he speaks about, I always talk about this ending period of the Master of Two Worlds, or the freedom to live, which is the end point. But the end point is the beginning point in the hero's journey. That's when they return. They've gone through all the cycle and they come back. And this point, in what Campbell refers to as the World Navel, and he speaks about this young Dakota boy, and he talks about this peak, and this is where like creation began. This is the World Navel. This is the center point of the world. And I've mentioned before how it doesn't matter what nation you go to, what tribe, they will have their creation story, and they'll say creation began here. And then you'll even see, and this is how distorted it's got, that there'll be disputes over where creation began. And again, if you understand the hologram, everything's part of the whole. The creation, there is like a center point of creation if you think about everything compressing into one, but that is going to be manifested everywhere, and every nation will have their story. So Campbell you will see this in nature, and the modern inception of it to mark the World Navel, where it's everything but nothing all in one, is where we put these monuments, right? And cities and center points of nation states and all these things that occur. And to impart like even those people within the World Navel, which makes a lot of sense of why they've got William Barak there, because how can you have all that exists within that nation unless you have the DNA of the people within that nation, within either the monument or the surroundings itself of the area? And that's why I think Barak has been put in there. And I'll mention again that reading Ebden Alexander's book years ago, and he speaks about the dazzling darkness, and he went into this hell realm that he calls the earthworm eye view, that he didn't know how long had been there. He didn't know what time was. He didn't know what he was himself. He had no perception or understanding. He called it such a low frequency that he had no understanding of who and what he was and who and what anything else was. And it was almost described as like disconnectedness, but he does describe it in some form of physicality. Whether that's only his perception or whether others have experienced the same thing, I've only heard that from him, but he said like that's like the hell realm, and it feels like eternity. And then he's actually taken out of the hell realm by a light, and then he enters into this heavenly realm.
But I was rescued, luckily, by this slowly spinning white light that came towards me, and it opened up a rip in the fabric of that ugly earthworm eye view, as I called that initial stage. And it led me up through this light portal into this brilliant ultra-real gateway valley. And that's the part that's so hard to explain to people. It was much more real than this world, much more detailed, much more memorable, much more meaningful, much more transformational. This was an extraordinarily rich environment that makes this world look very murky and dreamlike by comparison. And down below in this verdant, fertile meadow, I remember children playing, dogs jumping, incredible festivities. And it was all being fueled because up above were these swooping orbs of angelic choirs that were emanating chants and anthems, hymns that would just thunder through my awareness. And the best thing about the whole scene I'm describing to you is I wasn't alone.
That he describes as more physical in every way than the realm we're in now. But he insists on going, I want to go where we came from. And he describes this as the dazzling darkness, all that is waiting to manifest. So it's nothing but everything.
But in those spiritual realms, all of that begins to coalesce into oneness. And in fact, in the core realm, I recognize that my very conscious awareness was directly sourced in that infinitely loving God force at the core of creation. That was one of the things that I hesitated when I came back to call that deity that I perceive, that infinitely loving force.
It's everything but nothing. It was everything waiting to manifest that had yet to be manifest. And it's the same in the Neverending Story when Fantasia is destroyed. So he had to go through the whole process to find himself, to then everything was collapsed and destroyed, and she hands him the 1 grain of sand, and he says, "What's this?" And he said, "That's all of creation within 1 grain." And he said, and then she tells him that he can create whatever he wants. So that within that one point, which is that becomes the World Navel, that is everything and nothing, but it's everything waiting to manifest.
Why is it so dark? In the beginning, it is always dark. What is that? 1 grain of sand. It is all that remains of my vast empire. Fantasia has totally disappeared? Yes. Then everything's been in vain. No, it hasn't. Fantasia can arise in you, from your dreams and wishes, Bastian. How? Open your hand. What are you going to wish for? I don't know. And there will be no Fantasia anymore. How many wishes do I get? As many as you want. And the more wishes you make, the more magnificent Fantasia will become. Really? Try it.
The answer is no, because when Campbell speaks about the World Navel, he said when you listen to these tribal cultures speak about it, so he was talking about the mound, this Native American culture that says that all creation started on this mound. And like an example in Australia would be like Uluru, where they say, that's the birthplace of creation. But it is to them because the story is omnipresent. And what omnipresent is it's everywhere. And of course it's everywhere because then you go back to understanding the holographic universe, that one story or one part is going to be represented everywhere. As Jason always says, if something's true somewhere, it'll be proven to be so everywhere, because that is the nature of a hologram. And when they project holograms through beams, it's not different parts of the image, it's the full image everywhere. And so like when you create a hologram from a small picture like this and you project it through laser beams, that small picture, to make that say like 100 times bigger, then you project that image 100 times more, or whatever, however many it will be. But you're not breaking the picture down into smaller parts. You're just, every single part of that bigger picture is the whole of that. So of course that's going to be represented in the story of creation. You're going to have that everywhere. But so what he said is the World Navel it's like a physical place, and it can be within nature, and of course it will be, but then it's also man has created objects to be the World Navel. And the best example of that is
Joe, can Westerners grasp this kind of mystical, trans-theological experience? It does transcend theology. It leaves theology behind. I mean, if you're locked to the image of God in a culture where science determines your perceptions of reality, how can you experience this ultimate ground that the shamans talk about?
The best example I know in our literature is that beautiful book by John Neihart called Black Elk Speaks.
Black Elk was...
Black Elk was a young Sioux, or Dakota as it's also called, boy around 9 years old, before the American cavalry had encountered the Sioux. They were the great people of the plains. And this boy became sick. His psychologically sick, his family. I'm telling the typical shaman story. The child begins to tremble and is immobilized, and the family is terribly concerned about it. And they send for a shaman who had had the experience in his own youth to come as a psychoanalyst, you might say, and pull the youngster out of him. But instead of relieving him of the deities, he is adapting him to the deities and the deities to himself, you might say. It's a different problem from that of psychoanalysis, where you remember, I think it was Nietzsche who said, be careful lest in casting out your devil, you cast out the best thing that's in you. Here, the deities who have been encountered, the powers, let's call them, are retained. The connection is retained, it's not broken. And these men then become the spiritual advisors and gift givers of their people. Well, what happened with this young boy, he was about 9 years old, was he had a vision, and the vision is described, and it's a vision prophetic of the terrible future that his tribe was to have. But it also spoke of the possible positive aspects of it. It was a vision of what he called the hoop of his nation, realizing that it was one of many hoops, which is something that we haven't all learned well enough yet. And the cooperation of all the hoops of all the nations in grand processions and so forth. But more than that, it was an experience of himself as going through the realms of spiritual imagery that were of his culture and assimilating their import. And it comes to one great statement, which for me is a key statement to the understanding of myth and symbols. He says, I saw myself on the central mountain of the world, the highest place. And I had a vision, because I was seeing in a sacred manner, of the world. And the sacred central mountain was Harney Peak in South Dakota. And then he says, but the central mountain is everywhere. That is a real mythological realization.
Why?
It distinguishes between the local cult image, Harney Peak, and its connotation, the center of the world. The center of the world is the hub of the universe, axis mundi, you know, the central point, pole star around which all revolves. The central point of the world is the point where stillness and movement are together. Movement is time, stillness is eternity, realizing the relationship of the temporal moment to the eternal, not moment, but forever, is the sense of life. Realizing how this moment in your life is actually a moment of eternity, and the experience of the eternal aspect of what you're doing in the temporal experience is the mythological experience, and he had it. So is the central mountain of the world Jerusalem, Rome, Benares, Lhasa, Mexico City, you know? Mexico City, Jerusalem is symbolic of a spiritual principle as the center of the world.
And this is what the World Navel is, because it's also the story of the hero, because it's before the hero has started on the quest. It's all that is, but it is yet to manifest. The first stages have yet to be taken. The hero hasn't gone on the quest, and as he begins that, this is what Campbell describes, and why you will see it like in a shrine or in a circle. Even like the World Navel would be like the circle with a dot that we see as a sun symbol, but it's like the beginning symbol of creation because it is yet to go on. So this is why I was talking about the spiral, because Campbell describes it as motion and stillness, and the motion is like the evolutionary process. It's the experience that we go on, and the stillness represented on this center point is all eternity and infinity, right? And that exists within everything. It exists within all these stories, within ourselves. And what they're trying to do with things like the shrine is they're trying to replicate creation. It is both death and rebirth. It's every form of duality into one, and it points at the four corners of the earth. And he even describes a story, which I hadn't heard this one about. I'll play it here.
A farmer at work, and proposed to play the two a turn. He donned a hat that was on the one side red, but on the other white, green before and black behind, these being the colours of the four world directions, i.e. Edshu was a personification of the centre, the axis mundi, or the world navel, so that when the two friendly farmers had gone home to their village, and the one had said to the other, "Did you see that old fellow go by today in the white hat?" the other replied, "Why, the hat was red," to which the first retorted, "It was not, it was white." "But it was red," insisted the friend. "I saw it with my own two eyes." "Well, you must be blind," declared the first. "You must be drunk," rejoined the other. And so the argument developed, and the two came to blows. When they began to knife each other, they were brought by neighbours before the headman for judgment. Edshu was among the crowd at the trial, and when the headman sat at a loss to know where justice lay, the old trickster revealed himself, made known his prank, and showed the hat. The two could not help but quarrel. He said, "I wanted it that way. Spreading strife is my greatest joy."
But did you notice the four colours? He said like white, blue, black, and green, which again like is these colours of Islam, with like, you know, the Syrian flag, the Algerian flag, the UAE flag, the what else is there? Algerian. I think I said Algerian, but yeah, you get my point. Somalian. They've all got the same. These are like the colours of Islam and the crescent moon. But isn't that interesting of what's happening in like Revelation, that they're the numbers of the four horsemen? So describing the world navel, this is purely just off Google, just so people have an understanding. People can go look this up. The world navel, or the navel of the world, is a symbolic concept often found in mythology and religion, referring to the center point of the world or the cosmos. It represents a connection between the earthly and divine realms, and is often associated with sacred sites and places of great spiritual significance. Examples are Daphne in Greece, considered the center of the world by the ancient Greeks. Jerusalem, the foundation stone in Jerusalem, is seen as the navel of the world by some Jewish traditions. Mount Kyasha in Tibet, a sacred mountain revered by multiple religions as the center of the world. Cusco, the historical capital in the Inca Empire, believed by the Incas to be the center of the world. The Bundi tree in India, and I can't pronounce this one, Baba or whatever it is, called Peak, Arizona, considered the center of the world by the whatever Native American tribe people that is. But it's also, people would have heard this term, the axis mundi. The concept of the world navel is closely linked to the idea of the axis mundi, a symbolic representation of the connection between heaven and earth. That just fits the shrine so perfectly, doesn't it? The essence of the world navel is a powerful symbol that reflects humanity's deep-seated desire to find a center point and connection to the cosmos and a place of spiritual significance. And what have I been talking about, like this pendulum swing for so long, and what an obsession like with the hero's journey? And you can see how this is going to play out. And if you look at the focus now of the three Abrahamic religions and what we're seeing now happen with Gaza and Israel and now Iran, that all have a focus point on Jerusalem, the city of peace. So it's like this is the beginning and the end. And this is what I think, this is going to form something completely new. And I believe it's going to form a completely new religion. And this is why Jerusalem, the city of peace, is going to, in the global story that we're witnessing now, this is the Axis Mundi, or the World Navel. It is going to be the center point of a global event. And because the World Navel represents the hero completing the journey, we've gone through this whole cycle, whether you call it the precession of the equinox of 24,000 years, or other cycles that are existing. At the end of this great cycle is this death and rebirth, and it's a death and rebirth of humanity. And there needs to be something physical that actually represents that thing. And this is why I think like the Dome of the Rock is so important, and the triggering, if that building is destroyed, and whoever it's blamed on, it doesn't really matter, but the emotional triggering is because it is this symbol of this center point of the World Navel. And linking this back to the shrine, and this is why I think that they're going to birth something new out of this. And this is what I think Trump and his grouping are. They're not necessarily good or bad, but they are the new grouping that is going to lead forward this next kind of revolution. We're going away from that old dark satanic world and going into this, I don't even know what you want to call it, but definitely a lighter, more benevolent future, but it's going to be completely guided by artificial intelligence. And this is why I think this is going to be the destruction of the three Abrahamic religions, and not just its destruction, but it's forming into something new. But that's why with the shrine, there's so much coded in with the shrine with the 1111, and the 11 is the continuation. And I've mentioned this before. This is why, like in World War II, it's not a 2, it's a like 2 like that. It's a splitting. So 11 is actually a form of separation, which is a hero's journey itself. The whole thing is about the separation and return, but then a continuation. So it's a rebirth. And this is like, you look at all the stuff around, even like what Nikki spoke about last night, that the shrine is both a death and rebirth site, and all the burial ground that is on that site, but then the light that comes in and hits this rock, showing the connection between heaven and earth, making this central point. It's got the four corners, just like Campbell spoke about, pointing to the four corners of the world, and possibly a new empire in the land of Sinim, the land of Australia, the southern land. But the other one, this Carl Jung says this: every step towards fuller consciousness removes a man further from his original purely animal participation mystique with the herd and the submission in a common unconscious. Every step forward means tearing oneself loose from the maternal womb and unconscious in which the mass of man dwells. He has estranged himself from the mass of man who live entirely with the bounds of tradition. Indeed, he is completely modern man only when he has come to the very edge of the world, leaving behind him all that has been discarded and outgrown. Now, isn't that fucking interesting, right? And that's what it is. It's a new birthing of a new humanity. And this is why I think that both dark and light they need to operate within the same ritual. They both want to play out a death and rebirth, because they have to run with the natural cycles. They can't actually implement anything that's not happening naturally. So to tell us that we're going to reach a center point or a 0 point and coming into balance, that needs to play out globally in a physical way. And of course that makes sense now why all the Abrahamic religions are going to merge into one. And not just the Abrahamic religions, but all the religions are going to merge into one collective form of belief system. Because what you're doing is like, you're extrapolating everything within the hologram, all these different cultures and uniqueness, and merging it all into one center point, right? And what Campbell says here, he said, only when the man has come to the very edge of the world, leaving behind him all that has been discarded and outgrown. That is what we are here. We're at the end of the cycle. We've exhausted all opportunities of everything that can and was done within this cycle. And what that is like, we've all gone, both as the human soul and individually, on this own journey. We're coming back home. And you can see why. What I'm saying is that is naturally occurring, okay? And what they're trying to do is override that naturally occurring. So the other one was like, so Uluru is an example of the World Navel. And remember I told you about, or not, I didn't tell you, but Cindy Roberts told me, and I've spoken about how she said that you have the female on one side of Uluru and you have the male. You can see the clear male head on the other side of Uluru. So it's almost like that the rock itself and what it is not a feminine or a masculine. It is the World Navel. The World Navel holds all the archetypes, everything into one center point. And that makes perfect sense when she says that. It's almost like, it almost looks like a brain or a heart from above. And the brain is both the man and the woman, right? The masculine and feminine, the left and right hand side of the brain. So that's what the World Navel is. It's all these different things pushed into one 0 point. And you can see why the shrines fit so many of these things. And then you have the aspect of that the shrine is this building, at least on the surface level, that is this homage to sacrifice and war. So to give that building even more credence now to, if this actually is to become the World Navel, and I don't know about that, but that's just that's an idea, then it would have to be something around war. And what would a world war do? It would highlight the absolute peak of human separation and the point of, we cannot have this anymore. We have experienced everything we need through war. We're not going to do this again. And both dark and light sides can take advantage of that. But that's where I see it going. And yeah, the whole Iran-Israel thing now. Now, Madeline actually shared David White's Substack, and he's been doing a lot of talks with Michael Tazarian. And you can watch some shorts on the Unslaved podcast YouTube page if you want to get some of the free material. They only go a little bit into it, but this Islamo-communism.
The rest of the history of the world is the history of how this pestilence, known as left-wing politics, is the cancer in the blood. It's not that you don't get it in Judaism. There's plenty of left-wing screwball Jews who've been infected by the disease. Atheists, Islamists. So what we just saw there is Islamo-communism, that's left-wing. Yeah, so when Islam got infected at some point, we'll chat about that in a minute, by left-wing politics, Islam. And we know that Christianity has it too. It's everywhere. So what this does is it says, are you finished condemning your Jews? Isn't it more left-wing politics that's the cancer in the blood that you're looking for? And that is the origin. Say you do take the Jews. Say you do stick with them. Right. So in terms of the Bolshevik Revolution or any other anarchistic, nihilistic, revolutionary, Jewish conspiracy that's meant to be there, or ones that you can trace where a lot of people have Jewish names. Yeah, but they were mobilized not by Judaism, but by left-wing revolutionary politics. The fire in the mind went east and settled in Baghdad and Syria and Pumbedita and other lands in Iraq. Other places too, just to get out of the way. But the group that I'm going to speak about, which is the Gaonim or the Gaonate, they come out of Baghdad. They come out of Iraq, so we have to focus on them. But under no circumstances think that they only went there. We should link up to our show called the Eastern Illuminati. The Eastern Illuminati program. These characters do well out there. They become they're Jewish, but they superficially have a Muslim dressing. So when you see that the Jeffrey Epstein's little castle thing, and it has the Jewish colors, but it looks Muslim, it looks Islamic, right. The symbolism will bring them down. The symbolism will tell you all. If you just know what you're looking at when you look at that little building and the architecture and the colors involved. That's Gaonim. How many people do you know have heard of that term? These are the elite Sadducees who set up very occult. They were known to be wizards and magicians back then. Very erudite. You just leave these people alone. They re-enter the West. during around the time of the First Crusade, and they are eventually changed their name to Freemason, Freemason, Brothers of Light, Brothers of the Sun. So when conspiracy theorists are noticing a lot of Jewish symbolism in Masonry, well, unbeknownst to them, that's where it comes from. It's one of the elements where it comes from. Don't forget the Nazarenes. But since the Nazarenes and the Gaionim were connected anyway, it all comes out in the wash. So the big capital G that you see inside the Masonic compasses can represent Gaionim.
It is no secret about the Zionist control of media and politics and the US government and every other major institution. But that is being openly exposed now on the mainstream news by mainstream pundits, and now we have people like Penny Wong, Anthony Albanese banning people like this Smodrich, the finance minister of Israel.
Australia has applied targeted financial sanctions and travel bans to 2 senior ministers in the Israeli government, Ministers Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, for their role in serious human rights violations and abuses relating to Israeli settler violence in the West Bank.
Israel's actions are completely unacceptable. It is outrageous that there be a blockade of food and supplies to people who are in need.
Bibi had to make this super right-wing alliance with. Many say that he was doing that to save his own ass because he was going to be jailed for corruption within Israel, and then they started the whole October 7th thing, and now all the attention's on war, and there's an aspect of truth to that, but I don't think that's the only thing. But why now are we having an Australian government and other Western governments, it wasn't just us, it's been France, Britain, a number of US senators that have pointed this out too, and they've actually banned Israeli members of parliament from entering into Australia, right? You have former Israeli PMs saying that they are guilty of genocide. So it's not this simple exposure of Israel and we should all be cheering it on. Of course, like, they have been responsible for all these wars in the Middle East for so long, and some of the savagery and the shit of the last 2 years in Gaza. And we could go on and on about Mossad and their involvement in so many black operations. But again, you've got to understand the dualism. They are not, and the Jews were always a means to an end. They were always pawns in a game that were going to be hung out to dry at the end of it. And this is what we're seeing now. And those that think the so-called Zionists or those that are above the Zionists that actually control the Zionists give any fuck about the Jewish people, they do not. And people are going to work that out. But there's this other Islamo-communism side of it. And if you're looking at everything, especially if you go back to the Q post, the early Q post, and a lot of the theme the whole way through is speaking about Huma Abedin, Hillary Clinton, the focus on them and the focus on Obama, and then even ones like that Ilhan Omar and stuff that came in, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and links to the Muslim Brotherhood, right? And now what do we actually saw Huma Abedin, who was the wife of former wife of Anthony Weiner, with the whole Weiner laptop where we saw all that stuff. She is now married a Rothschild. So you have this merging of the Islamo-communism and the Zionists perfectly molded together, right? But if people think, we're going to expose the Jews and all this kind of stuff, I'm sorry, it's going down the line of exposing the Muslim Brotherhood. And I've said this for years, since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, what this was, because Trump continually spoke about the Iran nuclear deal from the inception, all the way back from 2016. He kept talking about the Iran nuclear deal and what a bad deal it was. I think they were making a nuclear weapon in Iran. And I think that is an aspect of why they went in there. And it seems completely implausible because BB's been doing that for 20 years, making that claim. But I think there's an element to that is true. And I mean, then you get on to like, if the Iranians, if there's a deep state, the Iranians control, they control every country, so they can let off a nuke anywhere. But it's not about that. It's part of this story, and it's part of a disclosure of a grouping that I'm not necessarily supporting. Well, I don't really support, but a faction that has a script on how they want this to come out. And what they want to come out is show the Islamo-communism side. And those that have looked in Barack Obama's life story, you'll see his mother or adoptive mother, Stan Anley Dunham, and then also his mentor. I can't remember the mentor's name, but he was mentored the whole way through his life by this fucking Marxist, right? And then you have a perfect example of like the Islamo-communist groups were the what they call that Malcolm X kind of grouping, right? And what do they call them? The the same ones that Muhammad Ali kind of went with. Anyway, so yeah, it's going to be. I think that's where it's going, because the money funneling. They're going to show that the money funneling into Ukraine was then being dispersed to Iran for both not only election tampering, but then also to build up a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, Iran. That's where it's going to show. And this is why it makes perfect sense why you have people like Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese and that going again, even though the left side, especially the Fabian left, has always, at least on the surface, stood against some of the stuff Israel's been doing, but like the level of which it's happening now. And this is why, of course, that they're funding all these left-wing. Why do you think all these left-wing groups in all these universities in America are pushing the pro-Palestine thing, right? So, I'm fucking as pro-Palestine as anyone. I'm just saying there is both sides in the funding of this and to push for an ultimate conflict. So it's not all as clean cut as people think. But anyway, going back to the point of the World Navel, I think this is like pivotal in understanding. First because it explains the hologram. It also explains human compression, because, as I've said many times, as we continually compress through the layers of reality, we're going deeper and deeper into the universe, into our own psyche, until you reach a 0 point. And the human being itself is a representation of the World Navel. Everything you've been, done, and seen throughout all incarnations, all into one body. You are the universe in one body, a walking universe. That is the World Navel. You are the World Navel, right? And then within you, that's why everything compresses. If you say, like, we're a microcosm of the Earth, then you take the whole Earth, you compress everything that the Earth is in all its abundance and fucking everything that it contains, and you compress that all into one human being. You have one human being. You are everything that is that, compressed even smaller. Then you compress the human body into a 0 point, which would be like the heart in this region, right? So going further and further in. So anyway, I won't keep going on about that. But yeah, I hope people get something out of that. But I'm now going to go do Immanuel Velikovsky's audio book. And I've looked at bits of that over the years, as well as Norman Bergen and Wallace Thornhill. But I'm going to go through his whole book, Worlds in Collision, because I think this is going to be very important now too, where I'm looking at a lot of the stuff around the UAP disclosures. If people are following like Ross Coulthard and stuff, it's absolutely wild where this is going. And if you're talking about the endings of all religions and birthing something new technology, and UAPs is going to play a big part of this. And I think the introduction of new technology, how it's going to come out, and the disclosure of new technology and the hidden technology is going to be through war and through possibly a nuclear weapon, in which they're going to have to show that there's technology well advanced beyond that. And who knows what they're going to use that for, to save us from something else. But I believe that is what the new technology, that's the introduction of the new technology, is going to be through a war scenario. And we're going to see weapons that we have not seen before. But that ultimately, that is actually going to disclose new and free technology to the world. And this is all going to link up with everything they're doing with SpaceX and all this kind of stuff. And the reason I wanted to read World in Collision, because they speak about Saturn's rings a bit, and that's why I mentioned Norman Bergen before. He wrote the book The Saturn Myth, in which they were showing that rings of Saturn were being constructed even in the decades that we've seen, not even over millions of years. And if people read, what was the other one, David Wilcock's book, Awakening in the Dream, and like, I know people like aren't into space and stuff like that. People need to have a really open mind about that, because there's some extremely convincing evidence around stuff that's on the moon and stuff that's in Mars, and ancient civilizations and colonization of space, which I think is where we're going. And I think there's been a huge psyop, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, to convince people that space isn't real. And they use this by going, look at this shit NASA footage. You don't think that NASA and the establishment could put out 100% believable images of space? Like now? And of course the moonland footage is fake. And that doesn't mean we didn't go to the moon. That just means the footage is fake. And the NASA ones now, to me, they are putting out deliberately fake ones to perpetuate this psyop that there is no space. And what do you mean there is no space? If you listen to Campbell talk about the omnipresence of the World Navel, that it is everywhere, and that the center point and movement, so it's both movement and eternity, there's an eternity, there's an infinity of space. So you can believe we are in a locked construct, and I do. But that's not all that there is, right? And the human being itself is infinite. So there is a potential infinite amount of time and space and frequencies and different dimensions. So I don't buy into that. But anyway, I've gone way off. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. All right, have a good one.
Land, lots of land under starry skies above. Don't fence me in.
This is a massive fire that's covered like a huge part of Victoria, and then bang, the state of Victoria starts that year takeover of this area, because you come from like those tribal stories. Then 2 women supposedly walk up and find gold in Bendigo. In that time, it goes from a tent city to like 20,000 people within a month, to 5 to 10 years later, it's the richest city in the world. The most elegant ballrooms we've ever seen. In the setting of the ball, a worker lost control. Listen to this bullshit. Lost control of his torch whilst trying to light one of the decorative sunlights. So the military actually was keeping a ghost log book in this building. The royal homages. So you got King Street. You'll get this in every town, right? You got King and Queen, but then you got Bull, and then you got Royal Avenue there too.
Same term in a way has been doing the rounds anyway, whether it's via the spiral, whether it's it's a theme across everyone. And even speaking to Indigenous people, like in Australia, New Zealand, America, wherever, they've all got different words for it, but everyone's talking about the same thing.
Numbers, as we know them, are actually the symbols that represent the different energetics of the universe. Literally to lead humanity towards freedom. If it wasn't for the 5 energy, we would just be going to... It's the 5 energies that look for the exit under a 5 energy. So did World War II. In fact, the London Olympics, that was also under a 5 energy. Any large, small proportion of humanity to take one side or the other, doesn't really matter which one you take, just that you take a side, we're going to do it under a 5 energy. Deal with this right here. You know, there's all of that going on in the world, but how does it impact me in my life with my family right here and right now, and how can I prepare for that?
Call to adventure. It's because we don't like stagnancy, and this is going to go into the spiral later, because we want movement, we want adventure, we want to know who we are. So it goes up the spiral, and the spiral representing DNA, but then the spiral itself also represents the unknown, because as you're climbing up the ladder, you don't really know. You've only got the next few steps to go. So it's actually a path of faith and trust in yourself. Every single thing, every bit of knowledge within the universe, within you. Then what happens there? Right? This takes away all victimhood. It takes away that, like, who's they that's controlling it. They's actually us. They's you. You're going to see it in nature. You're going to see it in a movie. You're going to see it in your own life story, because the fractal's playing out everywhere. And what I think we're doing in here is we do role play. You exist in reality and you exist in simulation. The Christ-like love and knowledge, it seems like he's already been through that process. And I think they've made this video to show that he's the way shower, just honouring your own unique soul expression, being the true individual. The beginning stages of separation, you're already longing to go home. It's so far unobtainable from where you are because you're at the beginning. You don't even know what home is. Pendulum's in perfect balance, but the whale is meant to represent intuition. It goes into the hole, and the moment it goes into the hole, he goes, oh my God. And it shows you that there's a point of divine intervention within the story too, through jealousy, its own version of light. Great, so thanks very much. Appreciate you.
Let me be by myself in the evening breeze and listen to the murmur of the cottonwood trees. Send me off forever, but I